Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Mike Anderson. My guest this week is Wildlife Division Chief Jeb Williams. Today we're going to recap the 2018 hunting seasons. Jeb, let's start out with the waterfowl seasons. How did waterfowl hunting go this year?
Sounds good, Mike. Yeah, it was a slow start to the year. Back in the spring and early summer, it looked like we were maybe going to have a repeat of 2017 with the drought conditions that we had, which obviously are tough on waterfowl habitat as far as wetlands on the landscape and the habitat growth, grass production that's needed for raising a lot of waterfowl. But after the early spring or spring and early summer, drought conditions kind of disappeared, and we did start getting some water back on the landscape here in North Dakota, and so it turned into what started out looking like a really tough conditions maybe for waterfowl. Actually, as the summer went on, things improved a little bit, so it was fair. I would say it's fair anytime we're talking about waterfowl. Obviously, with the northern with migration coming, that's determined by weather conditions, obviously, and habitat conditions. But so it was a fair year, and I think that's pretty good considering what we had in 2017 and the drought concerns that were not only in North Dakota but were in some of the Canadian provinces as well. Okay,
let's move on to upland game.
Sure. Yeah, I think that was a big question mark for a lot of people. Last year we had. We shot as few pheasants as we've harvested in North Dakota since 1999, and so it was a different year for a lot of folks that have been used to some pretty good pheasant hunting in North Dakota for a number of years, and things were tough last year. And
Jeb, let's explain why.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things, but I mean the number one factor obviously is we have a lot less pheasant habitat in North Dakota than we did a number of years ago.
And the drought too.
In addition with that, obviously the drought situation definitely played its toll on pheasant production. It was one of the things that was kind of interesting is we had a lot of observations. A lot of our field staff even saw some of these things last year. Was that the reproduction was there? Is that those pheasant chicks were just not able to survive, and that is consistent with drought conditions. If you don't have the dew conditions, you don't have the insects. Those insects are extremely critical for those chicks for the first 6 weeks of their lives, and if they don't have that, they don't survive. And so drought conditions can be extremely difficult on pheasants, and a lot of times I think we maybe overemphasize the winter conditions associated with pheasants, which certainly can be very tough on pheasants as well. But the conditions for the spring nesting time frame that we have there are extremely important for what our pheasant population looks like that fall. And so this year, I think people had an okay year. I think it was, at least in my opinion, as far as my personal experience, was a little better than last year. That's not consistent, of course, across the state. Some people probably said, it was a lot better, and some people maybe had experience of where it was even worse. And so we're definitely in a time that people are going to have to get used to lowering those expectations as far as what pheasant numbers are going to look like.
Sure, but people still found pheasants.
People did.
Let's move into grouse.
Yeah, and one of the other species that is that really has that you see some impacts with following a drought, of course, a sharp-tailed grouse. That residual nesting cover is extremely important for sharp-tailed grouse, and obviously after 2017 there was not a lot of residual nesting cover going into 2018. So we expected that grouse numbers were going to be down, and they were. But one of the things with grouse is they are a little more resilient. They're a native game bird to North Dakota, and so you can always find a few grouse around. It's just going to be a matter of how many. And this year people were able to find grouse, just not nearly as abundant as what they've been used to over the last 5-6 years.
Okay, what do you hear about partridge, Jeb?
Partridge, yeah, well, what's kind of interesting with partridge is, back in the 80s, early 90s, that was a very common game bird on the landscape. Since then, we have not had as many partridge on the landscape. Shifting habitat conditions, weather patterns, those different types of things, which are not as conducive to Hungarian partridge. The last number of years, we have started to see more partridge on the landscape, and so people. I don't want to say that people are harvesting a lot of Hungarian partridge in the state right now, but there's more of those occasional run-ins with partridge that people have not had that opportunity in a number of other years for quite some time.
Okay, let's move on to our big game seasons.
Always a big topic of discussion, big game seasons. One of the things that we looked at here this fall and just kind of reviewing a lot of our big game lottery species, lottery seasons that we had is that, you know, other than bighorn sheep, we had increases in all those. And that was a good thing, you know. Although there's some that are some pretty minor increases, you know, like deer, for example, we had an increase, although it was pretty minor, about 500 licenses increase from 2017. Pronghorn was probably one of the nicest increases that we saw. We had as many units open as we've had since we closed the season down after 2009. And we also had as many licenses available since that time frame as well, which was a little over 1,000 licenses and 10 total units. So some really nice opportunities out there for people with pronghorn, which we've not seen for about 10 years. So that was a nice thing. Elk, moose, sheep, our big three. Yep. And I'll start with our bighorn sheep. People like bighorn sheep, but obviously there's not as much opportunity available for bighorn sheep. But we did go down 2 licenses, and that's just an age structure, an age class that we have there. That our bighorn sheep biologist Brett Weedman just wanted to give us a little bit of a break here on that. We've been pretty aggressive the last couple years and didn't feel we had quite the age structure in place this year, so we just backed off it for a year, and we'll see how things look going forward. Moose, we continue to try to keep up with the moose population, especially in the northwest part of the state. Since the first moose season in North Dakota in 1977, we issued as many moose licenses as we ever had. So a record number of moose licenses, which was 334 licenses to be exact, Mike. Elk, right around 400 licenses. Still seeing good numbers of elk in our elk units in the state. Still have a agreement in place with Standing Rock Sioux Tribe on managing elk population in that area. So some good things across the board with some of our big game species.
Okay, let's move on to fur bear seasons.
Yeah, fur bears, you know, one of the things that I think always probably gets a lot of discussion is our mountain lions, mountain lion population. Over the last couple years, you know, things have kind of mellowed out a little bit with mountain lions. We did have kind of an oddity last year where we had an odd number that were harvested in the zone 2. This year has been pretty quiet. We had just a couple harvested in the early season, and now in the late season with some snowfall that we've received here lately, where dogs are allowed to be used to take in the late season. There are a total of 4 mountain lions now, and that season limit is closed at 7. So it has picked up a little bit. Coyote numbers appear to be strong as normal, and the coyote price still appears to be hanging on. So lots of activity associated with both people hunting and trapping of coyotes out there on the landscape. Probably the most widespread, the most common fur bear species all across North Dakota that gets quite a bit of attention.
And coyote season is open year-round.
Open year-round, yeah. There's no limit on them, you know, obviously, and so it's one of the things a lot of times with coyotes, and people, you know, want more harvest on coyotes. You know, it's a very liberal season the way it is as far as what you can do to take coyotes.
So far, Jeb, it's been a pretty good winter.
Yeah, we've been really lucky so far, Mike, and I think anytime you can get through December, we've had kind of an odd fall, odd winter so far. It seems like we had more winter in October and even a little bit in November than we had in December, and then now as of late we've picked up with some winter weather and you know, some pretty good snowfall in parts of the state, which you know, which definitely over time can have its impact on wintering wildlife. But anytime we can get to pretty much the first of the year with not too much winter, that's just that many days, you know, short of the wildlife are going to have to spend in real tough winter conditions. Because we know we're going to get some January, February, those types time frame. But if they can get to the first of the year with not much struggle, generally speaking, things are going to be pretty good going into the spring.
And along with habitat, that certainly helps these populations going in the right direction.
Absolutely. In North Dakota, there's no doubt that you know, habitat plays a very key role, but weather also does as well.
A lot of good information, Jeb. Thank you.
Thank you.
The North Dakota Game and Fish Department will once again track hunting and fishing issues during the 2019 legislative session. Interested outdoor enthusiasts can follow the proposed outdoors-related bills by visiting the Game and Fish Department's website at gf.nd.gov. A brief description of each bill will be included, along with a bill sponsor and hearing schedule. To view each bill in its entirety, click on the linked bill number. For Wildlife Division Chief Jeb Williams and the rest of the staff here at the Game and Fish Department, thanks for joining us for this week's Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.